Good afternoon. I hope everybody's well. And yeah, it's been a while yet again since I've done another stream. It's that time of year. Um, I can see my computer's freezing a bit, which isn't a great start, as per usual. Um, okay, so I am not going to go into too much detail on Bitcoin today. I am going to mostly look at alts, I think. Because I've had a few requests in the Telegram channel, and also because Bitcoin obviously isn't really doing much. I'll just do a very quick run through of what it is doing, just in this small range. So as you know, like high time frame, I am macro long bias still. So there's two kind of factors here for me. That one, obviously, we have a higher low over this level. So we still haven't broken the obvious structure. Second, I actually consider this, while this is a 3-month demand up here as well. Let me just turn my mouse thing on if I can, as always, remember the code. Yeah, so while this zone is still a 3-month demand, we're holding. This didn't really make a significant high over the zone, so I actually consider this more a true demand, where it has pushed up, made a higher high over there. So this is really where I'd want it to hold for a proper move up, because this I still somewhat consider a range, although I know a lot of people are considering a break of this as a break of market structure. But I guess we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. At the moment, it's still even just on a higher low there, so feasibly can still make a higher high here. On the bear side, we do have, going to the monthly chart, we do have a monthly supply up here. So I'm bullish based on what's currently going on. However, I'm cautiously bearish based on the fact we do have monthly supply. We have had a significant drop off that zone. We have the similarities that I've talked to you many times to what happened over here. Now, there's something I do want to highlight for over there and the current structure. So firstly, our bounce here is significantly weaker than the bounce we had there. But one of my major issues, I'm seeing a lot of people now, like not a lot of people, I don't like being the one to say, oh, it was only me that noticed this, but I chart and do trade slightly different way to many other people, but not many other people identified with the things that I was identifying in this up move here as being similar to that up move. However, since we've dropped, I'm now seeing a lot of people identifying where we are now as similar to this consolidation back in 2022. And that was kind of where I was initially at. My one major concern with that is that over in 2021, we had this demand made at the start of 2021, which then held a bounce here and then held the second bounce in early 2022. What we have over here is not the same. Like, we don't have a demand on the up move. And that's why I say this, for me, is the more important demand, because I don't feel like to me, this is almost a sort of fake demand. Again, it hasn't really made a significant higher high, which is the same as over here. So while we can get a bounce, and I did have it alerted, we do have the overarching 3-month. I don't like this for a strong up move as much as I like this, or, in fact, any up move. And I was trying to look back at the chart to see if there were any other comparable things that I could see what had happened, and there kind of isn't any. The only thing that comes vaguely close was this over here. But then even then, this did have a demand there and also has history to consider. But so when this came down, it had that first bounce off. Actually, sort of the difference is, I go for this bounce here in 2019 before the COVID drop. So if we have this consolidation go down, did actually break demand. And the major difference here from the current to the current state is that this didn't make a higher high. But you can see when this came up, this not sitting in a proper demand to the left, because it had already broken one in this case. When it came up, then it came back and it just dropped straight through that zone. And like I say, it's different because it didn't make a higher high. So what I'm comparing to is this 2019 little consolidation to that consolidation we have from the start of this year. And obviously we haven't dropped straight through this the same as we did in the COVID drop. And it is different because this consolidation made a higher high. But that was as close as I could come to sort of saying like why this is weak demand. It's because it's not sitting in anything significant to the left. There might have been on the weekly charts, and there might have been a daily in there or something that picked that up. But then it just came back through everything. And, even over here, we can see the same as what you see in 2021, that this had a demand here. It came and tested it. And then on the second test after the COVID drop, it still held that same zone. So in 2021 to 22, we had the bounce in it, didn't really make a significant higher high, came and retested it, couldn't get much higher, but did also have a decent bounce. So that's very similar to what happened back here. But where we are now, I just see this major difference is that this is not sitting on anything decent to the left. And that doesn't mean it's not going to go up. It doesn't mean it's not going to follow this same pattern that now everybody's seeing. I get slightly nervous when I think everybody else is looking for something specific. Now, the other thing that's happened with the weekly close, so we didn't get any significant weekly close on Bitcoin or Ether. The usual traditional exchange charts, or the dollar dominance, etc. However, on CME, get my drawings back, this did make a dubious 2-week supply. So we did get a close on that red candle just below the green candle, and it's still in a range, so it's not a good supply, but still something can be a weak supply, and that may mean I won't trade it. But what I tend to do is not trade against something weak, even if even acknowledging it's weak. I would rather see it flip back to being strong before actually taking a trade. And also in addition, this made a weekly supply. Now you can see last week's candle already came off this zone. It was already a 3-day, I think, at that point. And this is one of the problems you get when we're in these ranges. This is all still in a range, so that's why it's all weak supply or weak or strong. Sorry, weak supply or weak demand, depending on which side you're looking at. But again, like I say, I don't really want to trade against this because this is possible now. This comes off here and goes to make a lower low. And like I said, we don't have the same on normal exchanges, but it would make me slightly reticent to trade against this at this point. On the bull side, we did make a 5-day demand. I'll go back to the normal chart, my messy chart. So we are, again, just messy. And a lot of the majors are very similar to this, and I'll get to those quite soon. But this did make a 5-day demand. This, I can take my drawings off so you can see the red candle there, and then we closed above on this candle. So we are coming back to test that. However, in the interim, we then made a 4-day supply. So again, it's just messy in range, weak supply, weak demand. So we're inside a weak 5-day demand, but we're rejecting potentially off a weak 4-day supply. Well, it's now the second test of that zone. And I've got the supply drawn in this case because it's more recent. I prefer recency to further back. So for me, the bias currently is still broadly down, ignoring the fact we're in this giant 3-month overall, and obviously we've hit my green circle of this is where I wanted to look for longs. So in the highest time frame, I'm still long biased from here. However, I still need to see something on the lower time frames or the mid time frames to take that long off, because obviously we can still go deeper in this zone. Again, to highlight what I've had previously, I've got this black box in here. This is the 113 extension of that bounce, because this is a common, so it's 113 to 127. It's a common area, top and bottom, where we make a sort of fake out continuation and then bounce. So I would look in that black box for the possibility of a bounce. I don't love it for various reasons, but I always like to highlight those zones when you've got a consolidation, because are we going to have just a like a fake down into here and then come back up through? But then strictly you could be longing in here on the retest for another up move. But that's an area you can start to look for longs. And then failing that, obviously in the bigger picture, we've got 3 months demand below. The 61 fib comes in there on, I think that's the log scale. I think the linear scale actually aligns quite well with the box. And this is just the fib from that last up move. And then failing that, we've got annual demand below, etc. So this is a huge 3-month zone, so we'd have to see where it falls if it comes into here, but that's kind of where I'd be looking for the next set of longs if this zone isn't to give anything decent. And then on the short side, I've talked before, we've got monthly supply up here now, so that would be the preferred area for shorts. If we get up there, it doesn't have to return there. So again, for anybody who hasn't followed me for, I should reiterate, when I say, I want to get for longs here, look for longs here at 70k or below, for example, people go, oh, you're so bearish. And that's not the point. The point is that is an area I would look for longs. The price doesn't have to go there. Price doesn't have to go anywhere it doesn't want to. It's just you're looking at zones of interest for long and short entries. So we're currently in a macro zone of interest for a long entry, and I'm looking for lower time frame longs and shorts while we're in this range on just the trading. But then as an investor, you could just buy some here, and then if we do go lower, buy some here, and then those are the investment things on the higher time frames. And then more immediately, we've got this 5-day supply in here, would be the next sort of proper zone for shorting more aggressively. And again, if we're going to follow this pattern that everybody's been referring to now back from 2021, that would be kind of your first zone of interest. Equivalent would be the 5-day supply that we've got at 102-ish K, or 102 to 106K. And like I said, big zones again. So yeah, so that's pretty much it on Bitcoin. I just wanted to mainly iterate for this week. Like I say, not much has changed in all the things I've given previously, or the analysis, but that CME chart has got that new weekly supply, so that makes me slightly reticent. On US dollar dominance is much the same. We didn't make any weekly demand, which we were, 2 weekly actually, it looked like we could. We've just closed again within that tight little range. And you may remember I've drawn this. There's no accuracy in this line particularly, but I was comparing this again to if we followed that similar pattern back to 2021, which is over here, that we could get some period of sideways like this before an up move. So there's no time or price. I didn't even sort of really measure out where the bottom was on this. The 5-day demand on this would be equivalent to the same 5-day supply in inverse on Bitcoin. So again, if we do start to get a drop off here, at the moment it's still holding pretty well. So this, I actually feel like maybe the need to look at the USDC one. I feel like that did make a weekly demand, but I need to double check. We're still holding 4-day demand in here. It's a second test of it, so much the same as Bitcoin. So again, just still messing around in that range. Obviously it's moved up and now got to the top of the range, broken this trend line. But now if for the bulls or the bears on Bitcoin, you want to see some consolidation through here and moving straight up from here, else we could just see some drifting back down to the bottom of the range. And then given the time of year, it's fairly hard to judge. Liquidity is also extremely low at the moment. So yeah, it's not like zones aren't holding as well as they were. We're seeing some stop hunting, even though, OI is very low actually. So I've kind of gone off on looking liquidations so much because OI is so low. It's not really, I don't think it's really heavily being driven by that. Let me just check USDC quickly. Yeah, see, this did make sense. Come back through the daily there, but this actually made a weekly demand last week and it's only now testing it. It's up on a monthly supply on its second test. But yeah, so USDC is looking slightly more bullish, but again, still in kind of just an upward consolidation. I don't really like the slowness of the push. Do have a daily supply. But yeah, again, be conscious if you're trying to long Bitcoin that this is on weekly demand. US dollar dominance, the tether dominance, which is what I normally look at, is retesting a 5-day demand, and that we have that weekly supply on CME. I'll take that 2-week off now. So maybe I should leave it. Serve as resistance. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much all to say on Bitcoin. Ether is much the same. So again, CME, I'll show you CME quickly. Didn't make a 2-week supply, but it did make a weekly supply, which it's testing now, and that 12-hour inside. And I've had a short, lower time frame possibility here. So the ether's a little bit tough, and the same as CME as the usual exchanges, but it's got these 3 12-hour supplies, none of which have been tested. They've all been slightly front run. And if you use the wicks to draw your zones, which some people do, then you could argue they've been tested already. I don't use the wicks, and for me, I found that more reliable. So I would consider each of those zones a possible shorts. But then if again, when you have big drops like these, it becomes increasingly hard when you don't get proper retests. It's the same here, you know, this weak retest, which we were anticipating back then, you know, it came off these trend lines, which are, these previous horizontals, which was the zone I'd said I want to see held or flipped. So it did some very obvious move, but it hasn't come back and tested supply. Even here, I guess there's a supply in there, but there's a missed supply up here. And that's when my strategy becomes a little bit harder, because it could go and test. It could reject each and every one of these. So we could get a rejection here, then perhaps we get a higher low, and then we get a rejection there, and perhaps we get a higher low, and it goes up and just tests all of these zones. Alternatively, you can just get a move that runs straight through everything. And that's something I've been identifying, if you've been following me on alts, as a possibility. And ether's kind of pretty much the same here. You've got these sort of trend line stops. So it is possible, if it wants to, it could just run a green candle through absolutely everything. This is an argument for them being all supply, but then there's also an equal argument that if nobody knows where to short, then shorts don't happen, or if people don't have clear areas to take profit, then if it's not clear, then they don't work. Okay, so higher time frame, again, is pretty much the same scenario as Bitcoin. We had an enormous 3-month demand in here, this massive brown zone you can see. And then my preferred entry, I had a few entries on this because it was hard to know if it was going to retrace this whole candle. So I was looking for a bounce initially on the top of the 3-month, which didn't give very much. Then I think it was a 12-hour in here, and I think it did wick through it, came down to this 5-day, 4-day level there. But this was my preferred, so my green circle entry equivalent to Bitcoin was a little bit lower on this in monthly demand. And even this is not ideal. So if you follow me again, you'll know I'm nervous on Ether. We have demand that's saying, so we've got a 2-month demand down here. We have a 3-month just inside below that wasn't quite tested. Now we've got this big 3-month here. So from a supply demand perspective, and this is a bit too big to be considered decent, but even that monthly inside it, from a supply demand perspective, and from this structure, swing fail there, but then higher lows, potentially a higher high, you know, maybe we bounce here, maybe we bounce a bit lower. But my real reticence on this is the swing fail of all-time high. So we took out all-time high here. This is a giant range. We have an annual, so this level here is like that, a yearly level. I'd have to show you on the other chart. So I still chart on BitMEX because I've just been retaining that for this many years, and I still find it relatively accurate. So I think there's no problem with doing that, but it doesn't have some of the history on Ether pre-August 2018. So I think I've taken these levels off Bitfinex. But yeah, there is an annual zone here, which again was never tested. So the nervousness on this is that, you know, now we've made a range, we've taken out the high of the range. Are we going to take out the low of the range? And it would be pretty nice into that zone. So that's my reticence. And again, the signs off quickly. The supply demand argument is that we're in 3-month demand, so we're expecting a higher high from there. The bigger picture macro on this is that we have this massive range, which we've just taken out the top of. This is weak demand because it's unable to break supply at the top of the range. So while we can get bounces off any of these levels, they're all weak demands. So that's that. So yeah, on the entry side of things, so as I said, if I'd love it on this if we came down into that monthly demand and held that. That would be the nice area to look for a long if we get it, 2,500. The 61 fib on the log scale, I think, is towards the bottom of this, and there's an untested log 12-hour down there. So that's a sort of provisional level that you could look at. Sorry, a secondary level if we go deeper inside the zone. So the 61 fib is down at that black cross. The 61 linear fib is where we are now, which is possibly part of the reason we've had a bounce. Ether likes the 61 fib, so always every wave on Ether, if you're trading it, is worth drawing out that 61 fib to see where it's at. Again, in its favor, we've got this green line here. So you can see it was very much support in 2024. And we're holding that zone. And then there's another one a little bit lower down, 2,100. So those are the areas I'd look for longs next, should we revisit. And failing that, I think I wouldn't really be looking for a higher low here anymore. I guess, yeah, that you'd probably look in there. I haven't looked in too much detail down there. And then the 3-month zone, and then that yearly zone, obviously, if go a hell of a lot lower, you freak out. So similar to Bitcoin, I think this doesn't have monthly. This didn't make a monthly supply. So we've only got 2 weekly supply up here, a couple of 2 weekly supplies, well, the upper one already rejected, and then a weekly. So again, preferred entries for shorts would be if we do manage to retrace a lot of this. It's a little bit choppy up here, but that would be broadly the zone I'd be looking at. That middle of between those two crosses is a 61 fib of the whole down move. So again, preferred area for shorts if it's given. Ether, as I said a minute ago, has so many zones that you could look at. So we've had this provisional rejection of 5-day and 3-day supply. I delete some of the zones sometimes so I can see more what I'm doing. But so we had a 5-day and we have a 3-day inside it. That was where that entry that I was given previously was. It's now made a 5-day demand, so it's gone right almost to the bottom of that, but that's still holding. Then if we do go up again, we've got 5-day, 3-day supply in here. We've got some stops above this level. Should it want to retest again, that broken down level from previously, or those are monthly and the yearly open level. So potentially we could get a swing fail of this November high or early November, just one of the weeks of November's high in there if it didn't make it all the way up to here. This is also the 61 fib of the last sort of 3-wave down move. So those are the bigger picture things on Ether. Ether BTC. So holding this zone still. So again, we're still okay on Ether BTC, but I'm indecisive on a lot of these things. So we're still holding 2 weekly demand here. We went up and we rejected off 2 weekly supply, and then we've come back down. So we're just in an indecisive point here now, whereas, that we're trying to work out if these buyers here in this 2 weekly demand are stronger than these sellers here in the 2 weekly supply. It's got another zone up here, this weekly untested. So again, this would be a preferred area for looking for shorts against the US dollar pair, should we make it up there. Yeah, so that's about it. We're just consolidating through here, looking for, are we going to get another up move? And we came down pretty hard off that 2 week, but again, have made a higher low, leaving trend line stops below. The bigger picture on Ether, the more of the concern, and we'll see it more also on the Ether dominance chart, is that there's Ether dominance. This has come off 6-month supply. On Ether BTC, the 6-month, I think, is higher. But we do have a swing fail of this monthly supply. So we had a monthly supply in here. We had trend line stops above, which we'd identified previously, and that's why I'd had the circle going. Maybe we're going to whip through that. Yeah, the Ether dominance pair, I believe, is more up here structurally. But this has just potentially swing failed that monthly supply in there. And then again, I would be looking for longs on this really if it comes back down into there. Either way, even if we do hold here, I kind of just expect a bit more consolidation. Like, I don't feel this is just going to suddenly go up. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, so we're in a point where you can long. We've rejected the first area that you'd expect to get a short. So now we're just in an indecisive point of whether we're going to get continuation or whether we're going to get a deeper retracement down to the start of the impulse or lower. So that's pretty much it on Ether and BTC. Where are we at? Half an hour? How did that take half an hour? I swear I always feel like I'm quicker than I am. So on the lower time frame, I've really just been continuing to just add entries, and I haven't done loads. I haven't done much for this weekend. And now because we're in this sort of messy area, I wanted to wait. And typically Mondays I want to wait because we get some fuckery. So I think the last stream I did, I was expecting a wick to take out these trendline stops. I didn't have an entry on there because I wasn't sure if it could run up back to this untested zone up here. So that was the next one that I'd had alerted. However, it just rejected kind of in the middle of the trend line. So it wasn't very, very useful. We'd had a long from the start of the impulse anyway, and a slightly more aggressive long that failed, depending on where your stop was. Just for that little scalp there. Then it came down, still making a higher low. I expected at that point for us to take out this zone. And we haven't done that yet, so that's my next like low time frame entry below. And then we've got a couple of entries down there where the equivalent of that box was that you saw on the other chart. So yeah, that's just like sticking of assuming we stay in the range type entries. And being conscious that the very high time frame bias is up and the mid time frame bias is down, and those can play out in with bigger moves at any point. So that's Bitcoin. So yeah, not much new on that. Trying to think. I mean, yeah, there are some lower time frame zones in here that maybe we're going to get a higher low, but I really wouldn't mind seeing that 3rd of December or the December low taken out. Ether, much the same. Again, just looking for entries where they appear, where you're looking at zones, whether they're strong or weak, just for retest. So here we've got a current entry on this 12-hour supply. I didn't love that we could go up to the top of this supply. As I already commented on the CME Ether chart, we have a 12-hour here and another 12-hour at the top, which I previously had alerted and haven't been tested. This one's probably a nicer entry than the current one. It retraces to the 61 fib, takes out previous week high, so you can watch there if we get more of an up move. Then we've got little trend line stops, and again, still a big gap imbalance that could be filled and get back up to the top one. And as I've said, whether we do that in a giant up move like that, which then runs through all the zones. In fact, all of these gave mini scalps pretty much, but then these last couple got run through before we finally got the drop down. But at the moment, we're moving pretty slowly, and it's Christmas, so potentially we could get reactions on each of these. And then, so similarly to Bitcoin, we've got higher lows on the long side, and there is a 12-hour demand in there. So I think I was toying with the idea of putting a 12-hour long entry here, so I might do that after the stream. But yeah, so that's pretty much it on Ether and BTC. So let's move quickly on to, so I wanted to show the total 3 and others charts first, because obviously we're looking at that, the bias for ALPS, if I'm going to be showing you any ALPS. So total 3 has just made a 2-weekly supply. One of the challenges we've got on a lot of ALPS is so there's so much chop through here. So you can see that, so that's the new 2-week supply it's made just above. That 2-week was already a weekly, which has been tested. Then we've got a 5-day kind of mess on this, and the next 5-day supply has been rejected above. 4-day, we've also got a 4-day in there that's already been tested. So this is what happens when you start to get this chop. It then becomes lower probability to look, like if you were trading this chart, to look for shorts. And this is the challenge I have on majors, is they're all very much like this, and they've got thousands of lines and boxes on them now, where I've drawn all the 3-day, 4-day and 5-day zones. Some of them have now made the weekly and 2-week, or not many, I think, on as far as the majors go. But it becomes, again, increasingly unclear where you can potentially look to take profit if you're in a long or to short. Similarly, we could end up with a big pump through all these zones. Now, we do have, I think not every year, but at times we have had a Christmas January pump. So, this is obviously prime for that scenario to happen. But so far, we still have this supply right above. So I can't justify that. But then the difficulty is, so I would still say try and take some longs if you can, like very cautiously. I still think, these things can go lower. So total 3 is the excluding BTC and Ether, so includes all the alts. Then we've got others, which is looking more bearish than total 3. And as I've said, I wouldn't mind a test down here or even down there in the bigger picture. So the macro, I was looking at that big head and shoulders, which I think can still come down there. But as I said, when I did the previous analysis on this, similar to total 3, we've got so many trend line stops. So we took out this green circle with some wicks there. Then we had made this other green circle. This one didn't come high enough. Now we've made some more trend line stops above there. However, we still have weekly supply, 5-day supply, 4-day supply, etc. So while I can see that potential scenario, which I've drawn out here, so initially I drew out this large black line saying this was only an if we get bullish scenario. This is not a I think this is going to happen scenario, but if we get bullish, that there is the possibility that we get a run up to this untested zone up here that runs through all the stops. And we have seen that on some alts, but not many. I'm just going to check my Telegram quickly in case anybody's watching and can tell me anything. No, not getting much viewing today, so I hope this is all recording okay and everything. And nobody at least is even coming on saying to me that they can't hear me or anything crazy. So fingers crossed I won't be doing the entire stream again. But anyway, so back to others. This was the kind of bullish scenario on the lower time, on the mid time frames at least, that we could run up into here and take out all the stops. Then I sort of said, well, maybe that was a little ambitious. So after November close, I had that earlier, we did on this drawings again, close below that monthly level. So while it's not the cleanest monthly supply, I have it drawn in, but there is now a monthly supply of those 3 candles from this last green up move there. So then I said, I think in my last update, that maybe it wouldn't get as high as this, but maybe we could get into this area here where that green circle is, with a bounce taking out just some of the stops. But so far we haven't even achieved that. And we're just continuing this drift of death down. Having said that, I've also always said that, this is not a good demand. This is not even the best demand either, because it got run through here and has been tested. Arguably the area has been tested a few times. So yeah, on a handful of alts, we are seeing the run through of these trendline stops, and mostly they're just dying straight away afterwards. We had some of those, we saw some of those in October as well, or start of November, I think it is. And we had Near and Luna, for example, which will run through some of their trend lines above. I think maybe Luna's done it more recently. No, it was Near, Phil, I can't remember, so a few others ran through their trend lines, and that's when we saw this bounce here. But in the case of all the alts, we haven't seen those big moves. So again, each of these green candles is corresponding to a few alts running through the trend lines, but not the whole market. So whether we're even going to see that with the whole market, I don't know. I know a lot of other people are a lot more bullish than I am, but I can never really quite figure out based on what other than praying and guessing. Because so if I want to be bullish on this, I can go, yeah, we're at support, whether you draw it on that weekly zone there, or whether you just broadly say this is support. We have had a bounce here, we had a bounce here, much weaker. So hence for me, while we might get a bounce here, maybe that's over optimistic, that one, but maybe we get a small bounce here, maybe we get that up to the lower black line that I've drawn. But I'm not seeing this as a zone that I really think is gonna give a decent move up based on decent move, less decent move. Now what you'd expect is less decent move again, coming off the same demand. So yeah, to me, I can't really be bullish. The only thing that kind of makes me want to be bullish is the fact that so many of these alts have trendline stops above. So that's total 3 on others. Total DeFi, I think, is overall is slightly stronger, but still has that same potential head and shoulders, and also has a weekly supply. It's just testing now. And then finally, total excluding top 100, so the real shittier of the shit coins. This had already rejected here off 2 months supply, which I've talked about previously. Is this going to make a monthly? Actually, I feel like others. Oh no, it was the dominance ones. So let's go back to, sorry, total E100. So yeah, you can see again, just very cleanly off 2 months supply there. This previously had history. If you wonder why I've got floating drawings on my chart there, when they first released this chart, they gave us history, and then for some reason, unbeknown to man, they deleted it. But I still have all my drawings. I guess probably because it wasn't accurate for one reason or another. But I'm going to leave my drawings because I need something there. Otherwise, this chart's completely useless for another 5 years. But anyway, we have annual demand down here, but this is still in this sort of dying downtrend. Came off weekly supply. It's got 5 day, 4 day, 3 day various going on there. Does have the same trend line stops. Could see that pump, but so far nothing actually telling me that we're going to see a pump, and not decent demand to just kind of guess at that being the pump about being going to be about to happen. Maybe if I had more history and I could see what was more in this monthly this 3 monthly demand that we're in. But so it's not dissimilar to Bitcoin and Ether. You know, though it's in a giant 3-month demand, we had this huge wick down into it, which arguably is a fake wick because it was sort of Binance liquidations and things. But even if we ignore that wick and we just see we're drifting down into this zone, like, you know, it is potentially a falling wedge. It is potentially dying off, but I can't call this as falling wedge until I see a breakout of said falling wedge. You know, so, and even then it's got supply above. So if we get a move up to here and then it comes back, then I'd be looking for a retest, sure, and hope it doesn't just go straight through. But while we're still in this downtrend, that you know, how can you be bullish on this? Because this can potentially still just drift of death all the way down to here before we get that big move up, assuming it happens at all. Then on the dominance front, so Bitcoin bounced at the top of this weekly, not quite as high as I wanted on the 3-day here, and so we're still getting a bit of dominance coming in on Bitcoin. I never really kind of understand this because given US dollar dominance is stronger, I don't understand really why this is kind of looking not too bad either, but maybe it's just offset on the lower time frames. But anyway, but it still really would like BTC dominance down in here. Ideally, for me, this is potentially still just a B, C wave for then potentially a move up. So we'll see on that. Ether dominance, as I talked about before, to show you this quickly, this was the 6-month supply that this Ether dominance hit. But same scenario as Ether BTC, it's come into 2-weekly demand, it's come off 2-weekly supply. What's it going to do now? Anybody's guess. Others dominance on the 6-month demand had the wick into it, but looking likely to create a monthly supply. So what I have started doing on alts now is drawing in the monthly, 3-month, 6-month and yearly supplies, trying to get a jump on it, because I think it took me till March to do the whole watch list last year. So I don't want it to be like that this year. So I'm going to restart caning those over the next couple of weeks. But this is looking like it might create a monthly supply in here, which is not ideal. Additionally, it's got a new weekly supply in there. So while we're on demand, we have a test here already on that demand. And it's just, for me, very hard to judge at this point if this is going to give us any dominance to the others, to the alts. At the moment, you know, the bias is at the moment not, it's still down. And so total DeFi dominance, like I said, slightly stronger than alts in general, but again, it has just made it. I think it's got a 2-weekly supply in there now. It's already got a weekly. It's messy. But again, not giving me anything clear on this. Could still, you know, be running like this and just drift its way back down to the start of the impulse or lower, or could give us, you know, a bounce up to supply. But not in areas that I want to be looking for longs. Again, worse total E100 dominance, also not looking great. It's so it had a 3-weekly supply, which it rejected. It's made another 3-weekly supply, which I was optimistically, I think I had that circled there from previously, optimistically hoping maybe we'd get into test into there, but so far not giving any sign of that. And it might also make a monthly supply, a new monthly supply there, which isn't great. And then this wick, you know, it could come down significantly lower on the excluding the top 100. So similar trend line stops above, but until I actually see some significant move, you know, and it's even hard when you say that, because you can see here we had a significant move up, that October move, or actually this is a bit later, I think. No, that was the start of November, or this November move that we had up. But it was a strong green candle. But then when it came back for the test of this potential demand at the start, it's just gone right back through it. And that's what we're seeing on a lot of alts. And the challenge I've had, alts have been really difficult, actually. They are not, anything that's pumping doesn't appear to have any legs for any next leg, particularly, or like not anything, but most things, like 90% of things that pump don't seem to have any continuation in them. Once they're done, they're done. And I've continually said that I'm biased to the short side anyway, and shorts are much easier. But I have been setting long entries because on the off chance you get scenarios like this on the alts, you know, where you've got you know, it's gone up and it's tested the supply and it's come back and tested this demand, you know, maybe you're going to get that next up move. But I would say they're incredibly low probability. And for the most part, what we're getting is very similar to what you see here, that where it just bounces around in that zone, maybe gives a small move, maybe gives a move up to the next supply, but in many cases, not even really that. like very few are actually giving any decent bounce up to supply. So the longs are still just painful. And particularly on anything with history, like some of the ones that have been better are the new ones. So they're mostly the ones that I've been talking about, the potential of looking for longs on, and any other ones that have no significant supply close by. So I can sort of show you a few of those in a minute. So moving on from there to the majors. So I have gone through these and put all the monthly and 2-month supplies in, but given we're now 43 minutes and I want to get onto the alts that requested, I'm probably not going to go into detail on these. I'll just sort of show the local moves. So I've added in new monthly, 3 monthly, 6 monthly zones on these. Some of them are indecisive, some of them are clear that they're going to make them, well, unless we have some epic pump in the next 8 days. So TRX, obviously we had bounces on this 3-week demand that I wanted, got the higher low, then failed and came all the way back to the start of the zone, then got another decent move. It's now made a weekly demand off this, but still under weekly supply. So again, still a little bit indecisive. I have put a more aggressive alert on 2-day demand in there that came up yesterday. I've still got the possibility that we're just going to tap again into this weekly supply as a short above. So these are just local entries. Bigger picture, we can just go up from here. We hit 3-weekly demand. Nicer entry would be down on this 3-month, 2-week, 3-month zone inside if this is still going to consolidate for some time longer. And it's similar to Ether on this, although it hasn't taken out the high. The kind of the bigger picture thing I don't like is we had this giant up move, came back down corrected, but now we've had this fairly weak, it's not too bad in this last section of it, but fairly weak move up, which is potentially a B wave. So we still potentially are in an A, B, C scenario. Then it's a question of whether C holds a higher low for a bigger triangle structure, or whether the C wants to come down deeper against this impulse. Which always the challenges with corrections. So yeah, as always, I'm just trading. So the majors I'm obviously not trading as an investor anyway, so you can take what I say from the investment perspective. If you're an investor, you want to buy back down below, what's that, 26 cents if we get there. You can potentially buy a bit here if you want, being slightly conscious that we might be in this C wave, and where this C wave is going. This could be the end of the C wave, actually. Maybe it's an aggressive C wave and we're just going to go up from here. And then mid-time frame, be looking for shorts in any of these various zones above. Similar to Ether, could just run through all of them if we suddenly go super bullish for no apparent reason. Okay, so that's TRX. Get that done. Litecoin. So Litecoin, I've been reluctant a long time to say anything on the macro. This is why I haven't really looked at anything from the long side, just show you this quickly. So it had an annual demand down here. It's come down into there. So the annual I quite like on this, assuming we don't close below, what's that, $70 odd, and make an annual supply. But at the moment, this is just sort of a consolidation on the annual. And people are comparing this to Ripple, saying, it's in this giant sort of, Ripple had a 7-year triangle. I think this is a slightly longer 9-year triangle. That this could just run up from here. And it could, when you look at it like that, it actually doesn't look too bad. However, when's it going to go is anyone's guess. Is it going to try and take out these trend line stops below first, or is it going to go for the ones above first? So what I don't like on this is possibly could make 3-month supply. So again, you can see at the moment, it might close below, got the brown dash level there. I think it's already made an offset monthly supply in there, which is similar to what I saw on the others chart, and it's really rejected around that area. And then on the long side, so as I showed you, because of the giant triangle, we've got lots of monthly demands below, but they've all been tested many, many times. So I haven't really got any long entries, or I haven't got anything actually alerted on this, but that would be the long entry down there on 3-day demand. That's the next clean zone down that can potentially wick. Also, I'd have to wait to see something like this, that actually goes up and gives me something tradable if it comes back to. As I've said, on these, we have so much choppy supply that it's very, very hard to judge. I haven't put many alerts in for shorts because of that risk that we could just run through everything. I think this one, because of that potential 3-month level and because of this monthly, this one I did add one. has just missed it on that test, so I'm not sure. But I've at the moment got a local, as I don't want to get caught with just no entries if we're going to continue these sort of drifting down moves. So 4-day supply in there. If we get a bigger up move, 2-weekly supply up there, and then it's another 3-week higher again if it does want to sort of run through some of these stops. Yeah, so that's pretty much it on Litecoin. Yeah, I did look at the BTC pairs, and I kind of wanted to show them to you, but I just think it'll take too long today given what I want to get through. I'm just going to light a cigarette quickly. So now Ripple, similar scenario to everything else, I guess. It's got that chop in here. I think this one I did set an alert. Well, it's actually a 12-hour supply in there, but this has now made a weekly supply. Or actually, maybe it had the weekly last week already. Yeah, so it already had a weekly supply. It rejected off that, came down. Still making various 5-day. There's a 5-day in there, and then for whatever reason, I had the 12-hour alerted. Still got trend line stops above, still a bit challenging. So like, don't be, these are for scalps, like don't be like limit ordering anything in here, because I just don't know if these aren't going to wick higher and take out some of these stops, much as the same on the others chart. And that's generally been my reluctance to putting any entries on these while they're still doing these drifts of death. But then when I look in hindsight, they've actually been quite easy. You know, it makes a daily supply, it comes up and tests it, bounces down, makes a weekly supply, comes up and tests it. You know, they're actually not that hard. But it's just the risk that at any time they might reverse, given most of them are on. So even the LTC that I can't tell where I want to long is still on a macro demand, still hasn't broken that big 2-month demand to the left. Then you've got things like TRX that are clearer and, a demand that I could long. But something like this, like I was looking for the higher low, didn't get it there, or it made daily supply, so it just bounced straight back up into it. But yeah, Ripple, I want lower if I get it, and whether I'm going to get a short into that, it's going to be an aggressive short that just comes and just drops straight down, or whether we're going to get some, fuckery that goes higher or higher first. I don't know, but I still feel that this is going to retrace more of this. I don't know if that wicks enough. I really need to see how much that wicked on Coinbase, I think. Because I know at least on Doggy, for example, the wick on Binance is way, way lower than the wick that Coinbase got. So I still have this 3-day, where I've previously had alerts. I saw, and actually I put that one in later, and I actually never really liked this zone, and that was the zone I wanted, which ironically it then went through. But took so long, I was thinking, oh, maybe we'll get a drop down and take out that wick first. But I've got alerts still for these 3-day demands, but then really the yearly zone down here and the 6-month zone would be your preferred macro longs if we get given it. This is much more similar to Ether again as well. And again, just to show my drawing that I've shown many times previously. So the typical this is the typical Ripple pattern where it has a big impulse, it makes a triangle, it distributes and then runs straight back through the triangle. Bitcoin did this a lot back in 2019, 2020 as well. This was a very common Bitcoin pattern, but it's also a very common Ripple pattern. And very significantly did exactly what we thought it would. It had also done the same. That one again, we had a mini version here that we were looking at, that little triangle there, and it just ran straight back through everything. The risk we've got, I think, on Ripple is that we could have a macro version of this. That would be pretty bad. I don't know what it would take for that. Maybe another SEC thing. Hi, Stone Cold. Maybe another SEC thing would do that. But yeah, anyway, just be conscious that anything can happen in crypto. So hide those again. But anyway, provisionally, I'll be looking at the yearly zone for a bounce if we get one on Ripple. Then finally on the old majors, we get BCH. So now BCH also is a little bit more a challenging structure. We've got an annual supply up here, which we've tested again. And a lot of people, again, are getting very bullish on this because they have various sort of bull flaggy type things drawn on this. They might be right. My concern and my reluctance up until yesterday, in fact, to put any longs on this was that it had made a monthly supply. So we made a monthly supply when this candle closed in the red one in October. It came back up and tested it in November and then dropped down, but it didn't take out the low. So unfortunately, it didn't quite hit the entry I wanted. Then it did, on that bounce, it has made a 2-weekly demand, and various 5 days. So this is obviously more on the bullish side. My concern has always been on this choppiness of the move. I always wondered if we were going to throw a giant red candle and take out all these stops. Similar to TRX, I guess, we have a strong impulse. We have a strong impulse, not as strong, but, and a lower high. And then this just sort of weak ass move. And, it's difficult because, this has created a lot of support through here. There's a lot of demand. It's held a weekly there. I wanted it, like I say, slightly lower because this was the annual retest and a new monthly demand, I think, is in there. So it didn't quite get down to the entry I wanted on that, although we did get a secondary, second and third entries, I think, after the higher lows. But so I'm still sort of slightly nervous at this high time frame, and then because of annual supply. And also I feel like I think I won't look at it now, but I think the BTC pair is in 6 month supply as well, although it has probably pushed higher inside it now with this last move up. So as far as entries go, I was being a little too conservative on looking for, and that's also why it's black on this retest here on the 3-day demand down at the bottom. But that was because of the monthly supply. And that was obviously much more biased to the short side, but it's been giving some really nice swings, scalps, or whatever you want to call them, both directions. So we had some shorts and then re-entry, and some shorts and then again re-entries. This one didn't get down as low as I'd liked, and then we had a long on a retest here and on a retest here. And then as of yesterday, I thought, who cares? I'll put there's an 8-hour demand. I'll put a more aggressive long entry in there just because why not by the top? But also, at this stage, we've come so high now, like it is possible we're going to go and take out that previous high there. It's a daily supply that hasn't quite been tapped above, and we'll go higher into this 3 month up here. So what I'm really watching for on this is whether we're going to flip that monthly demand. So whether by the end of the month, we're going to flip this monthly supply to demand and close above here. Don't know if it's going to get and it's potentially going to get a 2 month in there as well. So I can potentially go more aggressive on the long side if we can hold for the next 8 days, 9 days, and we get that monthly or 2 monthly demand, those two levels confirmed. What else? Okay. So that's the old majors. I hope it's all okay. Any questions, hit me up in the Telegram channel. Those are all the zones I'm looking at. I think there's not much more to say there, and TRX is the only one. Well, actually, TRX and BCH are obviously the more bullish ones, but TRX is the only one that was really on a clean demand that I wanted to look for longs on. So then on the new majors, sheet A, which is the larger cap ones, although Solana is also larger caps on the next sheet as well. So BNB, we're looking for longs on this weekly demand in here, which we've got. Like I was looking for a more aggressive retest. I think it made a 5-day in here and had only come off a daily supply. So I was hoping we get a more of a bounce here to go up and again another bit more of a continuation. But I think at that point Bitcoin came down, so we came back down to the original entry and we've come back down again. This is one of the few majors I think has made higher lows. Like most of them, I feel like have kind of come down lower in this zone. Well, maybe that's the smaller caps. But yeah, so potentially this can still hold this zone. This can still be a little higher time frame, higher low, and get a decent up move from here. 5-day supply I've got alerted above, and then there's another 5-day and weekly. Should it go higher? Not dissimilar to Bitcoin, we're just in this corrective pattern that we're now trying to figure out if it's accumulation, reaccumulation for another run up, whether that's a bigger move on the correction or whether it's an actual impulse that goes to a new all-time high, versus whether this is going to be an A, B, beta there, beta here, beta there, and then C down, back down, deeper to the start of the last impulse. So we're just trying to play those corrections really at this point. That's it on BNB. Try and speed things up a little bit. Link was one of the ones that's actually made a 2-week supply. So again, it's tight and in range. It only closed very slightly below, but again, I'm not going to be longing this into the 2-week supply. Still holding monthly demand down here, but 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests with the wick that then ran all the way through it. So I've left it drawn in because whether we agree with or ignore the wick. But again, my bias on this is to the downside. Possibly it might create a 3-month supply. It also has, I think, the high time frames link's difficult because Link had a 6-month supply. So I was bearish on this for this retest, but then it came all the way up to the top and pretty much as high as it could go without taking that wick, and then it's looking like it's going to close back below the 6-month level. So that's pretty bearish on Link if it doesn't manage a decent monthly close, but if it closes back below this 14.28 level. And then, so we've got this 3-month, potentially 3-month zone as well, if it closes below there. So a bit on tenterhooks with Link, and not something I really want to trade right now. My bias is down, being conscious that we're on demand. If we do get an up move, weekly supply up here, and then another weekly at the top would be where I would potentially look again for short re-entries on this. And for longs, I'm looking at coming back down and testing this consolidation that we had back from 2022, which is a 3 months demand down in there. I'm basically retracing much more of that wick. That's Link. Doggy coin. Doggy coin was still in this overarching, and I think even Link actually, I should double check with Link. Look, we're still in these overarching annual demands on some of these. But again, it's just a question of whether, are we going to retrace that? It's a weak demand. So while we've had strength here, it hasn't closed above this supply. So this is still, this annual demand down here hasn't proven it can beat these sellers up here. So it's weak demand. And what tends to happen, at least on weak demand, is you don't get much of a bounce off the top. So as we saw here, we just had that corrective move. So this is very much showing that those corrections that I talk about, that we have the A move, the B move, and then this is the bigger C move. Or whether you want to include that wick or it's already happened, already down to there. And then the wick makes it difficult now to know if we're going to retrace more of the wick and pick up these previous zones, or if we're going to take out the low of the wick. But, still in annual demand, still on 2 months demand. So from a macro perspective, still not arguably okay. Looking like it's going to create a 3-month supply there. That's the real problem on Doggy right now. So I think I've already got that alerted for a possible short. It's already created a monthly offset supply there. So I alerted in that, what's that, a 3-day. Bit of a pause in loading. There we go. Okay, so I'd already had alerted that I think that 3-day, and that is very choppy. You've got a weekly above that's untested. But yeah, I'm kind of erring. If we confirm this 3-month supply here, I'm certainly erring more to the bearish side of Doggy. But similar to all the other majors, once we've had this, so this is a real indication of the chop that we've had on the way down. You can see all these pink zones, a 3-day, 4-day, 5-day, then that blue in there, the bright blue is a weekly. And I think this might have made a 2-weekly as well. No, this is the 2 weeks that from over here is that level. But yeah, I made a weekly supply, rejected that last week or the week before, in fact, and it's come down lower. It's hit, I did want this, on 61 fib, so it has hit that. Actually, it's the log fib there, I think, and then it was a little bit higher. And again, could bounce at any of the, we were in this weekly demand now, so maybe it's going to pick up support here, but with the wick, it's very hard to judge. And so far not giving me anything low time frame to make me go, yeah, all in longs on this. But the trend line could run through everything, but who knows? And then finally on these, we've got ADA. So ADA was, I wanted to be more bullish on this because again, we've got a 3-month demand in here, but now in fact, if it closes below this dash line, it looks like we're going to make a 6-month supply. And ADA, I think, was another one we think, no, this is kind of actually what I expected to happen on ADA. Again, it's just a question of whether we get some swings in the interim. And this doesn't have any more demand, I don't think, or perhaps a lot lower. No, it didn't close. It's got the annual demand from previously, but didn't close with it, and isn't going to close with an annual demand or supply this time around. But may create that 6-month supply, has created a 3-month supply up there. I think I did actually have a projection on this. So this is something very similar to the others chart. You know, it's something I was looking at for a while. I think I've got this drawing, just I went through it again. Yeah, so that was, I think I had this drawn from at least around here when we were coming up in that consolidation, that we had this big picture hitting the monthly supply, and that to play out low, but obviously it was taking its time in that second section of it. Take that bigger one off, put some one back. So then was looking at this, you know, are we just going to have a drift up and then that drop off there? So again, just these are corrective patterns. You know, when you're seeing the big impulse up move, then you've got the A correction, then the B correction, which you can see people are starting to go long again, because you've got, you know, people calling for new all-time highs at this point, but this is a very corrective pattern. And then we get the C wave, which can potentially come down into these zones, or if you're optimistic and things are stronger, make that bigger triangle. So it is possible we hold here, but my preference would be for down there. And particularly on ADA, my preference is very much for down there, because we have this, you know, this actually, you know, to be fair, this hit an annual level at those lows. So it is possible this makes a triangle, but really I'd like it down in proper demand. Retrace more of that up move to 61 fib is a little bit lower, you know, those sorts of things. So I'd really be looking for lower on this for high time frame long entries. Having said that, you know, we are on a trend line. That doesn't mean we're not going to get some sort of move up here. We've got some significant supply above. So yeah, I had, like, last week, while I was wanting to be bullish on this, because I think I had quite a nice move a couple of weeks ago, week before last. But it wasn't great. You know, it had a decent bounce off the entry that we had there. But then I think it was similar to BNB. I think I was just hoping we were going to had a 5-day demand, and I think I was hoping we were going to get another bounce that would take us probably up to, like, better supply, but ended up just rejecting off local supply in there and then coming back down again. So it didn't hold the higher low, you know, here or here, and has now made this 2-week supply. So I don't get chopped up on this, you know, that maybe we're going to get a bounce a little bit lower on this. I think we've got a 5-day, and we've retested this weekly zone down here. But at this stage, I just want to see what shorts are like on this, and whether we're going to get a rejection off that 2-weekly zone now for a bigger move down. And possibly if we come up to there first before this, I'll remove that entry. And then failing that, 5-day supply up here, then, you know, the bigger monthly, or actually it's going to be 3 monthly up there, and not 6 monthly, 6 monthly. Yeah, so that's going to be the 3 monthly zone up there. So I'm suddenly getting freezing on the internet. Slightly annoying. On the plus side, I've at least got through all the majors in an hour, or just over an hour, which is pretty nice. It's not going to be so nice if my charts decide to stop working just as I get to the bit that's actually been requested. So yeah, okay, so we've already got monthly supply up there. I've drawn it as a 3-month. So yeah, potentially if that confirms as a 3-month, I'd be looking over this whole area. It depends what we get when we get there. This would be the more aggressive entry as a 5-day supply, but then it could go up inside that and be on the monthly level, and then there's some other untested zones above. Once we start to get bottoms and things like that, if I start to think we are really getting up there, then I'll start looking at fibs and trying to see, you know, what the 61 fib is of that move to get, like, more clarity on where we might reject. But provisionally, I'm just looking at zones that haven't been tested. Once you've got a whole bunch like this, it becomes challenging. So I tend to alert the first one, and then we just have to watch as it comes into this area. But now, you know, ADA has this sort of significant chop here to get through first. It could just be a fake down. You know, maybe we're going to see the move I described on Bitcoin, that, you know, we've had this consolidation, whipped up and took out the stops, taken out the lows, and now we're going to start moving. But I need to see that reaction in there first. Okay, so that's the new majors first layout. Second layout, we'll do ADA, not ADA, Sol first, because that's the one that's the large cap, and again, I think more resembles the others, whereas the other three are just hideous. So Sol, just need to look at the higher time frame quickly. Yeah, so Sol is sort of still a little bit on the edge. I think we already had, yeah, it's got the big annual demand here with that grey line. So it's a huge zone, but again, could retrace, the log chart's a bit better, could retrace all the way to the bottom of that zone if it wants to. So we're just in this tight consolidation up here. and we're looking at what, supply is going to get made. Like we had previously had a 3-month supply, come up very high in that and drop back down again. And then it's looking like we've got a sort of an offset monthly supply here already. Should we draw in? So I have alerted that 5-day zone right. I think it's a 4-day right at the monthly level. Then we might create this 2-month, and then if we close below this brown line at the bottom, we might create a 3-month supply. And still very cleanly looking like a head and shoulders, but also still holding this demand. So, in order to be truly bearish, you really need to see this broken, retested, and that's when we're looking for that big drop. So for now, still holding that demand. So I'm still looking. So we have a daily demand here and another daily demand below. I'm showing you the 2-day chart though. So I had that alert. I think that went back here, but then it front ran me, and then it's gone off this time and held. But now again has 2 weekly supply right above. So similar to Link. It hasn't actually tested it yet. I think it did test it on the weekly. Yeah, so this is the other difficulty. So I have seen, I've been trying to assess this because there's so much of it going on. What you see on a lot of alts is that they've got 2-month supply. They've gone up and rejected the 2-month supply. But then at the end of the year, you're going to see that 2-month turn into a 3-month supply at this stage. And what I'm then not sure about, or haven't been sure about, is then if it comes back and tests that 3-month, having already tested on the 2-month, is it going to hold? And I think in most cases I have seen them be reliable, so I will be alerting them even when they've already been tested. Maybe they'll take out the previous high, maybe they'll go a bit higher in the zone, but I think I am seeing them work. When you have a lot of chop like this, obviously it's harder, because then where do you put your stop? Because you don't want to put your stop right on the next zone above. So if you, that doesn't bode well. Oh no, okay, phew. So I had some problems on the internet and here when it rains, and it's been raining really heavily for the past couple of weeks. So the internet sometimes drops out for short periods of time, which obviously is going to wreck my stream if that happens. So hopefully that won't happen. So I had a brief drop out then, but it only lasted a split second, thankfully. Anyway, what I was saying, so you can see here we've got a 5-day supply, and it's come tested and rejected, then it's made another 5 days. So if you stick with one time frame, maybe it's better. But because then you can start looking, okay, if you're going to short this 2-week, but it's kind of already tested inside that many times. So I don't know if this is going to be a very good 2-week. However, if you stick with just going, okay, I'm going to short that 2-week with my stop above, then fine. In this case, I'm not being as aggressive as that because I think this is still too rangy, and it's also a little bit too early in the week, but we could see a rejection on this around, where's that, the 130, 135 mark, and then get that drop down, but that would be kind of quite an aggressive short from where we are now on demand. So I've still got that daily alerted just at the base of this last up move, but really, again, head and shoulders play out like I'd like to see us. I don't know, we've still got monthly demand. Like it's tough, we're still on monthly demand, we're still consolidating on monthly demand. Still very much, while it looks like a head and shoulders, could still very much do this and then continue up. So I'm not going to preempt this and look for shorts while we're right on demand here. I'll wait and see if that gets broken, then great. If we make these, well, we've already made monthly supply. If that turns into a 2-monthly supply, or if we get a 2-month or 3-month supply on this, then I'd be more inclined to aggressively short. And that's the other thing I should probably say. What can often quite happen, and again, check on your alts, is that we can, this isn't even going to be the cleanest, excuse me, 3-month supply, but what can happen is if we get a close just below this level, what can happen is literally day 1, day 2, that we could come back up and tap that and just reject hard straight off it. So be very careful on whatever alts you choose to trade, because if they make monthly supply right close to price, you can see that immediate rejection and a really strong drop. So keep your eye out for that on those annual closes. Okay, so that's Sol, then Near, Dot and Atom just all look, well, Dot and Atom look particularly shitty, but Near is pretty shitty mid-time frame, but Near at least is still in 3-month demand down here. However, Near is looking likely to create a 3-month supply above. And so what Near did with that pump that it had this 2-month supply. Arguably, I wouldn't have put on this case. I wouldn't have put the supply stopping at the top of that green candle, because you can see it's got too many wicks around it. So it did come all the way through the green candle, but didn't take out the prior wick. So I would still say this held 2-month supply, and then it's going to close back below. So it's not ideal. What we were really looking for was for it to hold this range. You can see we're trying to get some longs in there, looking for it to hold this range, but it just blasted straight back down again. So in this case, it's looking at this point like it's going to flip that into a 3-month supply, or flip what's currently a 2-month into a 3-month supply. So I'll be looking for what kind of retest we get here. It's still structurally, it's still somewhat awkward, because we do have the trend line stops that weren't taken out on that. Excuse me. So on that pump that we had in November, October, the end of October, November, didn't take out these stops. So it's still possible we get something like that, and then ending up making some sort of a broadening wedge. Like those scenarios, these are the ones that really get me in crypto, actually. Like I find them quite hard. Like I can see them very easily after the fact, but I find them quite hard to judge before the fact. Like actually Forex, they get me much more, but crypto is less common, but crypto can still do, similar to here, that you get these like strong pumps, and you're like, okay, we're looking for a high low now, it's taken out. So you can see here, it's got that kind of broadening wedge pattern. And then you go, okay, well, it's made new demand, let's look for a higher low, and that move up, and it just goes in that, and just goes straight back through. All it's done is just stop hunted everything in order to continue the downtrend. So it's those broadening wedge corrections, I do find them more challenging. So possible this is a broadening wedge correction, but in that case, that would be good for this, because then it's going to go up and make that giant broadening wedge. However, as it stands, I'd be looking at just retests in here. It's got 2 weekly supply in there, the monthly and the 2 monthly that it wicked high up inside. If it just retests in that area and those types of zones, maybe even from down this 3-month level, I might bring that down if we confirm the 3-month supply there. So that would be sort of potential area for rejection you're looking at on that. Else, as I've said, if we do get that annoying broadening wedge, we'd be looking up here. On the long side, we are in this big 3-monthly demand, and have now tested this 2-day inside it. But again, it's anyone's guess. Is that going to be it? Is this going to be our bottom now, or is it going to go down lower? It's still too early to tell. And we still locally have all this 4-day and 5-day chop that we've got like on everything else. But I think for some reason I put a 12-hour supply alert on that, because I think it had broken down this trend line. So I'm looking for potential rejection there. And then I guess we'll see. Like, I wouldn't say any of these are massively high probability, to be honest. And then we've got Atom. So Atom, for a long time, I was looking for Atom to get to these areas to look for longs. In fact, it was slightly higher now, but obviously then when it finally did, it threw this giant wick through absolutely everything. We're now retesting this weekly zone. It took out the bottom of that weekly zone on the wick. It didn't quite hit all-time low, or I think Atom might have gone to 0 on Binance Spot. This is Binance Perps. I've got a feeling Atom might have gone to 0 on Binance Spot. Might have been one of the ones. I know Raven did, and some others. But yeah, again, this just resembles the Totally 100 and others charts that I looked at before. It's got all those trend line stops above. Could just run everything straight through it. And show that giant broadening wedge I was just talking about. But hard to judge anyone's guess. I want to say, because this looks nice, it's on my nice big blue zone, I want to kind of go, yeah, Atom, do it. But the Atom BTC charts, I'm going to show you that of all of them, it's just horrible. Like, it's just down, been down since 2022. And even if it does have a brief periods of up, they don't go very far and only last very short periods of time. And then people go, well, it can't go down forever. So, well, actually, it's crypto. It can go down forever. It can very easily go down forever. So, and I made that mistake, I think, on one of the others. I think Sol, which was looking weaker than everybody else on one of the bounces a month or so ago. And I kind of went, okay, well, maybe Sol's going to follow everything else. But actually, it turned out it was just weaker. So, you have to be careful between assuming everything, because the whole market doesn't move together anymore. if you sort of start assuming it is all going to move together and that something's just behind and it's going to catch up, you know, in the state we've been in for the last 2-3 years, no, that's not the case. Like, it's not that things are behind and they're going to catch up. It just means they're weak and nobody's interested in them. You know, so while I want to like this from the perspective of those trendline stops, so this is a good example of one that could be nice. So I would say keep an eye on it. Whereas I think a lot of the others I've looked at so far, like Near has already taken out a bunch of stops. Sol is a bit less. It doesn't really have stops in quite the same way. So this at least would be one of the nicer ones that could do it. Like if the whole market does have a little bit of a bounce, and if Bitcoin's gonna run, and what Bitcoin's doing right now, actually, let me just check. Just a bit of sideways, nothing exciting. But you know, if we can get a bit of a bounce on the market, you know, something like this might have the legs to go a decent way. But you know, where it is now, like other than the fact it looks nice because it's in my blue zone, but if I, you know, delete that zone off, that doesn't look nice at all. You know, we've already got a wick through that zone. Whether this zone is going to get picked up because it's on Coinbase and hasn't been tested yet, I don't know. So if you're really interested in something like this, then go and look at the other exchanges and see, you know, have they? Well, let's look at Atom. We'll look at the Binance and see where that went to. Actually, yeah. So the Binance wick did go to 0. Or where's that? Is that literally 0? 0.001 cents. So that's where the Binance wick went. And then in contrast, Coinbase actually didn't. So Coinbase didn't. Whereas Coinbase, no, this is. So I guess that's it. But no, Coinbase didn't. Coinbase probably actually would have gone to where I actually would have wanted the entry, like 2.3 or so. So, you know, if you look at it from a Coinbase perspective, which also doesn't have the history, it's just looking in a downtrend. So it's like, what are other people seeing on these charts? And what else will have history? The OKEX. Yeah, so OKEX did take a bit of a wick, but at least OKEX still has this potential demand here, or even, in fact, those two lows prior. So, you know, maybe you can make some argument for a high time frame buy on this. But, you know, you're very early to the game. You know, I would like to think this is going to give some more signs of going up first and hopefully not just run through all those stops. Anyway, as it stands, because we did have this sort of mini stop hunt on this one candle we had on the 20th of November, given this was one of the few that didn't move, I would, yeah, I've got an alert for 3-day supply in there with all this chop. But again, the preferred shorts would be up here if we get them. And then obviously I had the potential long here, which was like a high risk long. So it's up to you if you want to take that or not, because it's very early on in the game here and it's very high risk. And then finally we have DOT. So DOT is two things on this just for looking for potential bottoms. Like I had this green line and that green line. So this is the log chart. So this is the 61 fib on the log scale. This upper green line was the 61 fib on the linear scale. So possibly we could find support here. However, DOT is at least all-time low based on the Binance chart. Not sure if I went to what is it, CoinTrader.pro, whether I'd see any more history, but this is really all-time low on the Binance chart, and it's at all-time low and looking horrendous on the Bitcoin chart as well. It's just as bad as Atom does. So absolutely nothing about this that says buy. Other than, oh, it's on the 61 fib of the bounce after the dump. So up to you if you want to take that. But obviously I haven't had this alerted. I did have an alert for the all-time low like retest level, and it did get a bit of a bounce off there, but not very much. It has left a bunch. I was toying with having aggressive shorts on this, but then it's left so many stops above this orange line with all these. I don't think it took out. Let's check. It might have just taken out, but now, you know, those wicks are very close together. It's got multiple equal highs broadly there. So if this does run, then it's very likely to take out those. So I've gone with just a bit higher on this. Again, you see that possible falling wedge. So that's really what all these look like, and what I showed you on the others chart is they all look like. What do you mean my stream is not working? That's not great. There we are. Hopefully after an hour and 20 minutes, it's what do you mean not working? He's on Twitch, so that doesn't necessarily mean it's not working on YouTube. To be fair, I haven't checked Twitch. But I'm just asking the question. So somebody on Twitch has just said to me, your stream is not working. So I'm just asking why, how it's not working. Oh, I can see it's now gone black. It was working a minute ago. I can see it's now gone black on YouTube, which isn't great. Oh no, but it's come back. Just checking Twitch. Am I back, you? No, it says there's an error on Twitch. Seems to be working on YouTube, but I can't see it on Twitch. It's saying reload. It says live and unstable on Twitch, so that's not great. But I can't be playing with that now because sorry, but you're the only person who's ever really watched me on Twitch, so it's not really worth me spending time trying to figure that out. But it does at least seem to be still working on YouTube. Although it appears to be quite far behind. So I'm not sure why we're so lagged, or whether it's just doesn't show it to me for a while. Anyway, I'm just going to work on the principle it's still working and pray. Okay, so we're on the 61 fib, so you can long there if you want. We have that other green line at 1.226. If we come down to the log 61 fib, and then looking for shorts up there if we retest. I think so. This already has a 2-month supply in there, but it's looking likely to create a 3-month at that same level. So this was the example that I gave previously. That's one of the ones harder to judge, is that it's rejected here off this 2-month supply already, and we already a long time had shorts off there. But this is now going to be 3-month supply potentially if it confirms. It's going to potentially have a yearly supply up there as well, and a 6-month even higher. So there's going to have various zones. So I can only be continuing to be bearish on this, with the breakdown of all-time low. So unless we get some epic move in the next 2 weeks that goes through all this, maybe try to watch your Twitch stream on the Twitch app or mobile phone. Yeah, try that. Sorry, I'm just responding to. Oh. Yeah, I did. I don't know. Hopefully he'll come on YouTube, but yeah, I'm trying. If you can see me, I did try to look at it on the other screen on my computer, and I can see it says it's not working. I don't know why, but like I say, most people don't watch me on. It just says unstable. The video download was cancelled, so I don't really know what that means. But I guess, yeah, you're right. It's not working. But I will check that afterwards. Anyway, I wanted to get to finishing this because now we're up to an hour and a half on this. Okay, so yeah, still obviously in this epic down move. I'm not sure if you look at momentum indicators and things, you'll see this is horrifically oversold. So again, if you want to trade on that basis, that's up to you. But from a supply demand perspective, there really is still nothing to trade. There are, in most of these, there are reasons that, longs could be targeting for higher things, but we are not at levels that are decent for looking for the starts of those moves as yet. So either we need to have to wait until we see some structure, get some consolidation in here, see some, a daily demand or a 12-hour demand or an 8-hour demand to try and trade, like these over here, maybe this wouldn't have been in a good area to look for longs. We need to see some structure rather than just guessing that this might be the bottom. Okay, so Twitch is definitely not working. Right, so as I said, I've been going through everything, looking at annual supply and 6-month supply and all that. So I've had this request for what do we got from Irina of Anchor, Volta, which is A and used to be EOS, Pol and Cotti, which are shitcoins, I believe, that have been being held way longer than they should have been, and hope they're coming back. And unfortunately, I feel like this is not going to be good news, but I will check because you never know. So, and I don't think I've updated any of these yet. So I will be a good. Oh look, I mean, look, it's hitting a nice blue level 2-week demand right here. You never know. We can pray. But let's see what. So at least I can show you how I'm updating these things for the annual closes, or what's likely to be annual closes. So I mean, arguably this is an annual demand run now, so that could be the prayer. But then the wick came all the way back through it. But this is looking like, so if it closes below this 1535 level, then it's going to create an annual supply. 6 months, nothing new. So 3 month supply we've already got up here, obviously hasn't come back and tested that. So when I'm doing this, I'm looking firstly at overall structure. There are the zones that haven't been tested. Why that's in that, oops. Are the zones above that haven't been tested? It could go back for, what's the structure it's doing. So this is very much a structure that I've just mentioned to you a couple of times in the stream. We've got, an impulse up, an A wave down, a weak B wave down, and then a C wave. And in this case, the C wave has taken out the low. But at the moment, if we ignore the wick, that we're looking at a zigzag correction, and really you want that zigzag to come back, kind of broadly to demand at the bottom of this impulse. Now it could hold here. In this case, actually, it looks like it didn't quite hit this monthly zone there, so maybe it would hold here. So I would potentially look at that. As I said, some of them may make these triangles. They may make a higher low here, but I don't find is overly common. Like normally, you get this. You will get zigzags on crypto, particularly. And these zones in the middle, I normally say they're weak demand. So when you have a big impulse up and it makes consolidation and goes up again, normally it's weak demand. So i.e. when it comes back, you expect a bounce, but then the bounce probably doesn't get past supply. So this is really just following exactly the same as, what we always expect on excuse me. So this is following exactly what we always expect for a correction, for the most common corrective pattern for crypto, at least. And crypto, in fact, probably wouldn't even bounce here. And like in many cases, you get this and then to zero. So unfortunately, this is not looking great. In its favor, obviously we're now, if we ignore the wick, we're now hitting 2-week demand inside this monthly. So we can pray, but I wouldn't really be saying buy this. There's other things to buy, and my preference would be to buy this, back down there. So at the moment, I've got a potential short entry. So again, this is also helps for other alts, because this is kind of indicative of a lot of the structures I've talked about. We've got we've got 2 month supply already in there that hasn't been tested up here. This in this case is not going to make a 3 month, but it might make that yearly. It will have a 3 month flip level up here. So from a short perspective, I'd be looking up here in 2 month, 3 month supply at the top, or more aggressively in 2 month here. So while I say that supply, that's for demand in the middle of waves is not strong, it's the same with supply. So we are seeing, if it's prices are weak, we are seeing retests in this zone, which then do continue down. But it probably is highly dependent on what support it's on. In this case, at least it's on support. So maybe we'll get a move up to the top of this down move, and then we'll see. And then if this is going to hold and we're going to get a bigger impulse, that is possible at this point. So I guess that's the kind of bull scenario. And that the correction is now complete here, and that we're going to move. It's kind of the lowest as it can go and still be complete and still hold. So down at the bottom here is monthly demand. So that would be kind of my preferred entry for longs on this. But you can keep an eye on it at this point. But I guess it's at the last point that maybe you could add to a trade and kind of DCA depending on where your average entry is. in its favor, I guess at least it's got, trend line stops on it. So again, as I've said, like a lot of these 2-month supplies have these trend line stops through it. And I'm seeing a mix, like I'm still alerting them because I'm seeing a mix. Most are still rejecting here. And then there's a few that are running through and taking out the stop. So this could get back up there. But yeah, I would say sort of, if you're holding on to this and you want to get out, if you're lucky enough to get back to, what's that, 2.5 cents, I would get the hell out of this. And, if you want to risk adding a bit here, that's up to you, but, keep a stop loss on at least the new bit you add, so if it drops below this wick, then you're out and then you re-add back down here. And then your sort of risk entry, if you could get a break even at 1.4 cents, then I would sort of suggest getting out there if we do get a bounce. So that's the first one, Anchor. Then we've got A or EOS. Oops. So yeah, so you can go, if you go to cointrader.pro, then you can get the history on these charts. So I think I kept that, but I think it's somewhat irrelevant now. I believe, that was 50 cents. So I believe, we kind of went through these lows that we had from 2018 on at 50 cents back in October. So it's kind of irrelevant now. So, I mean, really, like, this is just in an epic downtrend. If you look at this is going to be somewhere, we're at 16 cents. We're somewhere kind of down the bottom of this chart now, having just sort of drifted off a cliff down to here. So yeah, again, there's not much I can really say on this. If I wanted to be guessing and bullish, then like I say, oh look, it was swing failed that wick. Maybe we're going to go up from here. If the whole market gets a move up, maybe this is going to be okay. But let me see. So, so far, really, what I'm seeing is, which is one of the difficulties in making it. Yeah, it's a little bit harder on alts to judge, because because again, they've so many of them, or at least the bearish ones, which is most of them, have had these significant drops. And it's like, if it's going to come back and retest, are we going to get a big bounce that's going to test monthly supply up here? You can wait for a short and look for longs up to there. Are we going to reject, 5-day weekly supply in here? Or are we just going to be like aggressively rejecting here? So, do you want to long this at all? You want to just look for a short on this? So to me, this is obviously clearly short bias. If we argue the wick is the low, then maybe you could make a bull thesis for this. But, like, as I said, I don't think those wicks are particularly valid. I thought I had charted another one of these. Maybe not. I thought one of them had more history. Anyway, I'll have to hunt for it afterwards if that's the case. Yeah, so I mean, like on this, I can't say anything bullish about this. Again, you could potentially pray that that's the low and that we're going to get a run up. I would look for a short there, and then obviously monthly supply up here. Let's check the monthly. Yes, then have a monthly, I guess, not a 2 monthly. But if I look at this, it's very likely this is going to have an annual supply as well. So I think you're really holding on to this for kind of nothing, in my opinion. But whether you want to wait at least for some sort of a rally or some sort of mini alt season before getting out, then that's fine. What else have we got? So Anchor and Pol and Coty. Let's do Coty first, because Pol, I think, is another one's kind of going to zero. Okay, and this is not looking great either. So yeah, Coty was one of the ones that I spoke about that, like Phil, for example, that we had that big bounce in the start of November. It went straight up into 2 month supply and then was rejected. So I think I missed the short on this because I wasn't on top of things. But so again, just going top down, looking at the annual, this is looking like it's going to create an annual supply. So I'm going to put that in now. It's got a 6 month level that's going to be just below that annual. It's going to have a 3 month level here. It's already got a 2 month supply in there that I've had alerted. So that's what I had alerted before, that the wicks haven't quite hit on that previous one, the last up move we had. So you can see here this up move just rejected monthly supply and didn't quite run through to the 2 month above, which is where I would have wanted it. What that floating cross is doing down there. We're in 6 month demand. We're in 6 month demand. We've come down into a monthly inside it. So I think, so we did have, that was obviously a decent move off that monthly demand. So I think the ones that, things which do have history, it is worth looking to the left and seeing what you have on it. But, as you can see here, like we had wicks from the big drop and then a retest and then a decent up move. But again, when I was looking for, okay, it's made a weekly demand, it came back and tested it really quickly and it's just drifted death straight down afterwards. So again, like this is not a long for me right now. Like the bounce that we've had off that zone has essentially happened. It's got a 2 week supply in there. It's got a 2 week supply. It's going to have an annual supply. So potentially I'd pull this alert down. If we create that annual, I'd pull this alert down and just look for a retest up at the top of this this drop. So we've got another weekly supply. So you can again see on here how it just, fake pump, doesn't hold the retest, then drops down. In fact, doesn't even come back and test. That was one of the problems I've had, that, even when I put in these, let's look at this on the low time frame, but I think this didn't bounce at all, but it bounced for like a day. So in this zone, it's it's a weekly zone, but still it kind of gave one bounce, just didn't even get up. We'll get up to the 12-hour supply. So fine, you could get a scalp off it, but then it's just drifted death down, came back down to the start of the impulse, which I didn't have alerted. But even if I had, it barely went anywhere before just drifted death continues. So yeah, again, with scenario on this, that it's in this, I don't know why I've got that not going all the way to the bottom, but we're in this giant 6 month zone. Could give us the bounce from here. We've had the start of one, so we need to see just a bit more accumulation here. If we can get some sideways like this, then maybe we can run up through here and play this 6 month out. If it can happen before the annual confirms, even better. That should be deleted now. That can be deleted. But so I guess what I'm saying on these older ones anyway is that we've got some element of, you can pray that we've done an ABC and we're now waiting for the next up move. But I think we need to be super cautious, We need to be super cautious of the new supply that's been made and not, just assuming, we do see the odd crypto run through things like this. So it's possible it can happen. And if the whole market does it, then great. But, for the most part, we don't see that. For the most part, we're just seeing a test and then dropping lower or drifting through all the demand. And so pull might be, which I don't know, pulls are not going to have the history on here either. So yeah, I think I just drew in the history on this. So, excuse me. So yeah, we do have, charts on CoinTrader.pro. So it's actually got an annual supply, which I don't have drawn in, which I should have. I might have to go and update this chart properly. So you can see over here that this is from CoinTrader.pro. It had an annual supply at up to 76. Oh, I do have it drawn in actually. It's just got a monthly over the top of it. So you can see up here, this was where the annual supply was, and you can see it came up into that and rejected it. And then you can see that I think that was 0.30. It was trying to hold, that support is up here. It's trying to hold those tests, and it's now, where are we now? 0.1310. So we're sort of somewhere down here in this bigger picture chart. So Pole really is like it's already at the point that it could retrace all the way back down to 3 cents, which is, again, I'm not necessarily sure of my accuracy on these lines down here. Maybe that should be a touch higher. I'll have to go and check those. But yeah, so it was just trying to compare like where this could get to. So this does still have support, but it's all the way down here at 3 cents. So at the moment, this is just looking again like it's going to drift of death. It's in a 3-day demand here. It's got the annual supply. So let's see what the new chart has in the way of supply. Things going over the top of it. Okay, so we've got an annual supply. This is, so you can see I've got a new chart here and then an old chart. So we've got an annual supply at 63 cents already, so it's not going to make anything new. Then it's potentially going to make a 3-month supply there, but I think it's already got a 2-month in there. Yeah, so it's already got a 2-month, which is tested, and that's going to turn into a 3-month in the next couple of weeks. And then we've got a monthly that it kind of consolidated and whipped through that level there. So there's not going to be much new on this. But I had obviously a more aggressive entry on that, just on the basis that this probably isn't going to hold. It's obviously trying to. Funny, isn't it, how it's not even on the chart? And in fact, most people won't even be bothered to look at this, these types of levels, because they are they're just looking at the new chart, or they're not trading this. But particularly on something like this, or something like EOS, which is now Volta, because obviously the history is disappeared entirely. So, but people are going to see this. With the other argument is, are people going to see this as support? It's interesting that it stops here regardless, but do people really see that as support? So anyway, we've got a bit of chop through here. So obviously I had an alert set, I think, on this 5-day because it had just rejected off the 2-month there. It's got a bit of a gap here, so you can watch that for a short, but very choppy. It's hard to know if it's going to kind of try and run through things and get back up to testing 2-month supply or 3-month supply higher inside. But at the moment, again, I can't be bullish on this, and I'd be looking for longs back down at 3 cents. If it gets there, else I'd need to see something lower time frame. So, if you want to make bullish arguments, which I'm sure people will, they can say, oh, this is in some sort of a falling wedge pattern, but to me, it's just not. Like, people will call these falling wedges and things, and it's like, well, it's only a falling wedge once you see the compression and then you see the breakout. While it stands, this is just a downtrend. And it's funny because people will call this a falling wedge, i.e. it's bullish, because a falling wedge is a bullish pattern. But they won't call the equivalent, if they see the same going up, they won't call that a rising wedge. But they'll call this a falling wedge and say, oh, look, wait for the wedge breakout. But they won't call anything to the upside that looks the same a rising wedge. That crypto long bias that we have. But anyway, yeah, so if you want to short this is perfectly shortable. Okay, so yeah, that's the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought there were more that were wanted, but yeah, that's the 4 that were requested. And yeah, that's and I've been going on 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I think I'm going to kind of stop now. Is there anything I can say? So yeah, I think I've already said, obviously I have heaps of alerts coming through like normal. There are some things, it's a very mix. Like, mostly I'm biased to the short side. There are some things that I'm just keeping an eye on, like this on 80, for example. So anything has this massive drop, and then, big gaps to sort of any sort of decent supply, I'm just keeping an eye on retests. For the most part, they're not working. So I would, just be very careful and conscious of that. Then you've got some stuff that's just continued to be, okay, we've finally got Pippin dying. You've got some stuff that just continues to be crazy, like either I look for short entries on sort of retestable time highs. In this case, it broke out. And then I'm just watching the structure, and you've just got to really be on top of stuff on the low time frames, because it's, the structures are just hard to judge. This is a nice example of that, a top side broadening wedge that I was talking about, where in this case, obviously I have had an alert here for supply to look for a retest and a lower high, and it's just run straight back through it. That's some nasty broadening wedges that I really don't like. And this one, to be fair, like any all of the short side on this, I have been disclaimering that we're still holding demand. So in this case, this one I might be okay with, actually, because it's still holding demand. And I probably would have made that comment there. And I know I certainly made the comment here when we were looking for these shorts, and that one obviously has worked. So it doesn't matter if you're still holding demand from the perspective, but you just need to be aware of that. You can still look for a short, but just be aware that at this point, this is still in an uptrend. And it can still, even now, hold and continue the uptrend. The structure on this I was likening to FHE, which was the same. I made a daily supply in here, which it then went through to an untested hourly or 2 hourly at the top, and then it ran straight back through. So I was just comparing this to the FHE structure. So Pippin's finally looking like it wants to die. ICNT has been super strong. Another one of the challenges, so I've been looking at lots of longs on this. I've been very long biased on this, but it kind of just killed me back in November because it had this big monthly demand, but it went all the way back down to the bottom of the impulse. This one was was better, more an aggressive entry there, and it's given a few new entries, but it's very hard to judge on the alts. Like you can see here, these are really strong moves, but then really deep pullbacks, really strong move and then really deep pullbacks. So it's been quite hard to know whether it's going to be shortable, so I'm still looking for the possibility of shorts that, particularly here because it took out a significant high there. But then it's come back up and again done this. And now we're just seeing, it's on 2-day demand here. I again have put a possible short there because obviously this again has come down fairly heavily. At some point it might reverse. So it's been very, I'm still setting all the alerts, but I'm just being very conscious of the likelihood of alerts. The probabilities have certainly decreased. Beat's another one. A lot of people are trading Beat, which has just been, continuing this up move. I think I've managed to get 1 or 2 longs in here, and then this one, it came deeper in the zone, but still held. And then again, looked like it might roll over here, left all the trend line stops, but no, did another run instead. So I can show you that, but then in contrast, we have Light, which is another, we have Light, Folks, Clo, So Light, again, was just doing really well, going up, ran through supply there, ran through all-time high, and then just fell off a cliff in the space of a couple of hours. Like no retest, so I think I immediately put the retest there, but hasn't given any, and then I added one there, even if it only came back up to 2-day supply, hasn't given one. So, once they're ready to drop, and I probably expect this off Beta as well, and maybe off Pippin. Folks is another one that gave that room. But it's a very hard to time. Normally they will give you some sort of a retest. In fact, here it depends also whether I'm looking at it. Sometimes it gives the retest and I'm just not looking at it at the right time. But this is another one that I could see here the possibility of breaking out. Like initially we were looking for shorts to potentially take the stops there, but then it just carried on breaking out, got a long entry, but took its time, possibly would have whipped and taken out the long entry before running. Then again, was looking at this potentially being a fake out of all-time high. But again, no, then just did this crazy up move before dying with no retests. So yeah, just rather painful. And even when I pulled the retest down, like it doesn't seem to want to come back. Now it's got 5-day supply in here. You can potentially look for longs on this, but once this is done, I suspect it's done. And we've seen similar in the past with, let's say, Form, for example. So this was one, like you can see, this is another historic one that was quite similar. We were just getting lots of nice trades both directions on this, and then it had this last pump and then just went to zero. So it's Folks and those others could still be at these points where they're just doing small consolidation, sucking people in. I think this maybe fell off a cliff a lot faster and harder. But once they're done, are they just done? Layer. What happened to Layer? That was another old school one that we was trading similar. It's always interesting to come back to these charts when I haven't looked at them for a while. This was another one that, I think was obviously giving. I think it was like quite a lot of these. I was giving a bit of a running commentary on this one when it was happening, when it was breaking up here. And unfortunately, I wasn't biased enough to look for the long side. I think the whole market might have been down at this point, which is why I didn't really want to look for longs. Or, well, actually, this one I would have had in from over here, but then obviously didn't get tested once it had broken out. And then it just sort of kept running until eventually it just fell off a cliff. In a similar scenario, I think I would have had a short entry up here, but never came back. And then similar, so that's why I could say compare to Folks, because we could be in this type of scenario on Folks where it's just not going to get back up to any of these supplies and it's just going to ultimately die off a cliff. So be conscious of those ones, but yeah, you're really like, if you can get in some of the shorts at those highs on these ones, then that's great. Change this back to Beat, but I'm still watching it. And then some of the newer ones are the other thing to look at. So you're pretty much short biased on everything, but some of the newer coins are giving some sort of runs up. whether they're letting you have, this I was saying reminded me very much while I was looking for shorts in here the other day, and it had a 12-hour supply or an 8-hour supply, I think. I very much said, oh, this one reminds me of Folks, and I think maybe I've deleted, I did copy and paste the Folks charts in here. So yeah, this is unsurprising. This has done this run. Again, like how much legs has it got? Is it going to come? It's made a 4 or 5 day demand there. I've still got the alert on the 12-hour here. Is it going to come and run? Is it going to do more what Folks did, which is consolidate through here and run? Or is it just done? Like, it's hard to judge. Is it just going to now run down through all these trendline stops already? So yeah, so I'm struggling to judge these as well as I have done previously. I'm reluctant as yet to change my strategies mainly because it's December. So if this continues for another few months, then I'll start thinking of new strategies and new ways to trade these. But so far, I don't see the need, because for the most part, if you pick, so while I get a lot of alerts going through, if we pick the right ones, so H was something we talked a lot about in the channel, unfortunately didn't come back for re-entries, but I was kind of really going, this is in a 6-month demand, I want to get into longs on this. So one of the group, I think, managed to take it off the 4-hour here, but I'm not sure has held it. And this has just run. But, another nice example where how we're looking for running through all these trend line stops. So obviously I haven't had any short entries in there. Well, sadly, it didn't come back, but looking for those trend line stops to be taken out. Jelly, I think, did similar. Trend line stops through here, so we did manage to get some longs. It had a monthly, 2-monthly demand. So you're looking for either the brand new things that they're still high risk because who knows how long they'll last, or the semi-new things like Jelly or H, which have monthly demands, and and it's the first test that we're getting recently in the last 2 months, first tests on those monthly demands. And we still need to see if they're going to get back up through these supplies. And obviously Jelly, I think Jelly did give. So I had an alert for weekly supply. So obviously it went up higher inside that. And then I had an alert on, I think, on a 2-hour supply there. So again, it did get a scalp down off that, but just didn't get very low and then continued. And then similarly here, it had a daily demand, got a nice move, but not very high. So again, it's just awkward to trade, because even if if you got that 2-hour, great, move your stop to break even, stopped out. If this one on the hourly, you wouldn't necessarily have thought to take profit there unless you've been looking at order books or something. You might have wanted to hold up to this supply or up to that 3-day level, for example. And again, but then it comes back down and one candle stops you out. So they're just sort of very, very messy, some of these charts. RTX, you can see that's gone 50%. So again, so this is something new. So it didn't come back down to my level that I wanted a long from. But so it's not an easy market to trade. It's at the moment, so I wouldn't beat yourself up. But I think this part of this might be that it's because it's Christmas. So don't beat yourself up. And then I'll update again next year if I think we need new strategies. I should also say, obviously based on what I've showed you on Totally 100 and on the others, well, that's dominance, but on the others, on even the market cap charts, you can see what these are doing. They're a mess. And this is not normal price action compared to what we've had previously. We can get that to the upside. But we don't, we did it over here, for example, and then got a little ping up, but we're getting like bigger moves. But, even for the last year and a half, you can see we've just ended up with, the last year or so, we've just been a sort of sideways, very small moves. They're very hard to judge with no group of alts running at one time except DeFi. But mostly just 10 alts going today, another different 10 tomorrow at the end of the week, and they just vary. Anyway, we're up to 2 hours now, so I am going to sign out, and then I'll attempt to do the timestamps as well. I've had the challenge last time. For some reason, YouTube has really slowed down on the timestamps. It was just a couple of hours from when I was doing streams before, but now it seems to be like 24 hours later. I'm still waiting for them, and then it's hard to do the timestamps. I should really note some down myself, and then it would just be a little bit, I could at least do some basic ones. So I hope everybody has a great Christmas. If I don't get to do a stream before, it's another 3 days. Maybe I'll try and do one tomorrow. We'll see. I still need to do my Forex one, actually, with all the results for the last now probably 6 months, because I haven't done one for so long. But yeah, if you have any questions, obviously come on the Telegram channel, talk to me in there, and ask anything you want. Don't beat yourself up if you're struggling to trade this market, because it's not as easy as it can be. It's never entirely easy, but it's definitely at the upper end of difficult at the moment, in my opinion, as well. Just because we've got so many corrective patterns and so many are these supports going to hold kind of scenarios going on for final bounces and all that sort of stuff. Continue to be short biased on alts. If you're hunting for longs, it's going to be challenging. If you're trying to get things before they break out, it's going to be even more challenging, because there is 700 alts and it's very, very hard to judge what's going to go when, if only 10 are going every few days. So I hope everybody's doing well, and I hope you enjoyed the stream, and have a good evening. Ciao.